In Gaza, 90% of the buildings are gone, leveled, reduced to dust. Premature babies died when Israeli forces cut the power to their incubators. Medics, journalists were targeted. The regime's senior officials openly called to starve an entire people. Children shot by snipers while eating. Mothers stopped producing milk because they themselves were starving. Over 67,000 people killed within 2 years at the hands of the occupation regime. And through it all, through every bombing, every massacre, one country never wavered in its support: the United States of America. I'm Roya Purbagar, and this is True Promise.
While AIPAC is often seen as a powerhouse of Zionist lobbying in Washington, it's Christian Zionists, far larger number, who form a backbone of unconditional U.S. support for Israel. Christians United for Israel, the movement's flagship group, boasts more than 10 million members, but the real number of Americans who share its ideology is likely much higher.
Who defend the anti-Semitic chants of "from the river to the sea." It is time for you to resign so we can finally dispose of your Jew hatred on the ash heap of history.
Christian Zionism fuses faith with politics. It teaches that Israel's creation in 1948, its occupation of Palestinian land, and continued legal settlement are all part of a divine plan leading to Jesus' return. Rooted in 16th century Protestant interpretations of biblical prophecy, the movement sees the so-called Jewish control of the Holy Land as a necessary prelude to the Second Coming. Supporting Israel in this theology isn't just politics, it's prophecy.
Hello, I'm Pastor John Hagee, the founder and national chairman of Christians United for Israel, also known as CUFI. Over 40 years ago, my wife Diana and I felt the Lord's direction to create a night to honor Israel, an event that would bring Christians and Jews together in an atmosphere of honoring the Jewish people for their contributions to Christianity. Today, CUFI is the foremost pro-Israel grassroots movement dedicated to educating, motivating, and empowering millions of Americans to speak and act with one voice in defense of Israel and the Jewish people.
But there's a darker edge. Christian Zionists' ultimate goal isn't Jewish salvation, it's their own. They envision an apocalyptic end time in which non-believers perish, while true Christians ascend to heaven. Their backing of Israel, then, is less about solidarity and more about self-interest dressed in Scripture. Still, their ideology aligns neatly with Israel's right-wing cabinets and their aggressive policies toward Palestinians and the resistance axis. Christian Zionism's influence in U.S. politics exploded in the 1980s. Televangelist Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, pillars of the moral majority, forged direct ties with Israeli leaders and brought millions of evangelical voters into the Republican fold. Under Ronald Reagan, biblical Armageddon shaped not just rhetoric but policy, with top officials reportedly praying for the world's end. By the early 2000s, Falwell's movement had become the Republican Party's largest voting bloc, deeply entwined with pro-Israel causes. Christian Zionists lobbying even helped overturn a 1975 UN resolution equating Zionism with racism. A remarkable diplomatic reversal achieved after years of coordinated pressure from groups like the National Christian Leadership Conference for Israel. Their influence only grew under George W. Bush. Evangelical leaders opposed every step toward a Palestinian state, and their grassroots campaigns, like one that sent 50,000 protest postcards to the White House, succeeded in derailing peace efforts, such as a 2003 roadmap. By the Trump's first 4 years in the White House, Christian Zionism wasn't just influential, it was in power. Figures like Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, and Steve Bannon openly embraced this worldview. The administration moved the U.S. Embassy to Al-Quds, endorsed West Bank settlements, tore up the Iran nuclear deal, and unveiled a peace plan that erased Palestinian sovereignty. Behind it all was a fusion of Christian end-times theology, Zionist politics, and white nationalist ideology. Meanwhile, the Trump-era crackdown on Palestinian activism continued under Biden. whose administration failed to reverse measures like the State Department's adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, a tool often used to silence criticism of Israel. And now Trump is back to back the Israeli regime with no strings attached. The enduring alliance between Christian Zionism and U.S. power reveals a dangerous paradox, a movement that claims divine purpose but thrives on domination, casting colonialism as prophecy and injustice as faith.
We're now joined in the studio by Dr. Elham Katkhodai, a leading scholar and professor of the history of Zionism at the Faculty of World Studies in Tehran University. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, to start, could you help us understand why many evangelical Christians view regional wars as part of the end of times, and how does this translate into practical support for such wars?
So this belief is part of what they call dispensationalism, in which history is divided into different segments, and the final one in which we have the final emergence of the Savior or the coming back of Jesus Christ, is an era in which, according to biblical prophecy, Jews should be living in and having a state in the Holy Land. So that's why this is very important for a big segment of these evangelicals. We should bear in mind that not all evangelicals are Christian Zionists. There's a large population of evangelicals in the United States. There are some in other countries as well, but not all of them share in this kind of end of times belief system. But for those of them who do believe in this turn of events, this particular issue has become very important. So the fact that Jews have a right and they should be living in and having a state inside Palestine is something that they should necessitate. They should do whatever they can to help this happen.
And that's why they would regard supporting such
Of course,
wars as...
It's not just politics for them, it's a part of their belief system.
Right.
Because it's part of God's will. God has willed this to happen. It's His plan for history, so that's why we should be doing all we can to make this happen.
Support this movement
Yes.
and let it lead to that.
Yes,
Well,
of course.
beyond just being a matter of personal belief, has this worldview of theirs shaped or, let's say, redirected Washington's policies?
Well, these so-called Christian Zionists have very specific institutions where they come together and they get united behind specific types of policy led by individuals who are very effective leaders. So it's not just individual Christians living in different states and having their own belief. It's actually influential institutions that act in a way as a kind of pro-Israel lobby inside the United States. So when we talk about the Israeli lobby in the US, what we usually have in mind is AIPAC, J Street, these types of lobby groups, which are Jewish American. But these Christian groups also, like, for example, Christians United for Israel, these are, the members and the leaders are Christians, but they also have this very firm belief in their duty and their obligation to influence policy. And that's very important because the United States is basically the most important and effective backer of Zionism and of the most important supporter of Israel. So that's very significant. Leading the United States into a kind of a unquestioned support for whatever the Israeli government does, and not just whatever, but the most right-wing, radical policy that Israeli politicians, because we know that Israeli politicians themselves have a kind of different ideological beliefs, but the most right-wing of them, what they say and what they want to enact, like, for example, the issue of the settlements, moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, these types of policies are things and policies that these groups advocate.
Right. For deeper insight, we sat down with Dr. Said Hadi Burhani, assistant professor at the University of Tehran. A specialist in Palestinian studies, Dr. Burhani earned his PhD from the University of Exeter's European Center for Palestine Studies and has published widely, including in the Journal of Holy Land and Palestine Studies.
صهیونیست‌های مسیحی در آمریکا خب واقعش اینه که الان تعدادشون افزایش
In the United States, the number of Christian Zionists has increased compared to the past, and they now make up a significant portion of the voting population. Therefore, one of the key ways to influence U.S. policy is through the ballot box and elections. In American politics, this influence is primarily seen in two major elections, congressional elections and presidential elections.
انتخابات کنگره و انتخابات ریاست جمهوری. یعنی واقعش اینه که اگر کاندیداها بتونن
The reality is that if candidates can win the support of Christian Zionists, whether in presidential or congressional elections, they will be in a much stronger position to win. A clear example is Trump's victory, in which Christian Zionists played a significant role by participating in the election and voting for him.
و آرایی که برای ایشون به صندوق رفت.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
موارد متعددی هست در سیاست خارجی آمریکا که
There are numerous instances in U.S. foreign policy where the American government or the president has taken actions or adopted policies under the influence of Christian Zionists. This group places special emphasis on Al-Quds, or as they call it Jerusalem, as well as Israel, because they believe that the second and final coming of Jesus Christ will take place in the land of Israel and in Al-Quds, and that this will only happen when the Jews have full control over the area. Therefore, they strongly support Israel's complete dominance over Palestinian territories and want Al-Quds to be recognized as the capital of Israel. They view this as a necessary prelude to the second coming of Christ, and they support any action that reinforces or solidifies this belief. One of the key demands of Christian Zionists was for Al-Quds to be declared the capital of Israel and for the United States to officially recognize it. As you saw, this is exactly what happened during Donald Trump's first term as president, when he moved the U.S. Embassy to Al-Quds, an action that fulfilled a major goal of the Christian Zionist movement.
به اصطلاح منتقل کرد به بیت المقدس که این چیزی بود که مسیحیان صهیونیست در واقع می‌خواستن. یکی از موارد دیگه‌اش
Another issue is the Golan Heights, a territory considered occupied under international law and United Nations resolutions. During Trump's first term, the United States officially recognized the annexation of the Golan Heights by Israel. In effect, the U.S. accepted that Israel had formally incorporated this region into its territory.
Thank you for recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights.
اسرائیلیا و یهودیا در واقع به این حمایت
Israelis and Jews have a dual perspective toward Christian Zionists. On one hand, they welcome their support because it is extremely strong, perhaps the most unwavering support Israel receives anywhere in the world. The main reason for this support is that it stems from a rigid and dogmatic religious belief, one that is unaffected by political considerations. It is rooted in the conviction that the conditions must be prepared for the return of Jesus Christ, and that this return will only happen when Jews have full control over the land of Palestine.
اسرائیل برای اینکه این اتفاق بیفته و اینا بر فلسطین حاکم بشن.
The word Armageddon is actually two words, Har Megiddo, or Hill of Megiddo. You are standing on the hill of Megiddo right now. The final act of the book of Revelation is going to begin right here at this place.
اما از یه طرف دیگه واقعش اینه که
On the other hand, Christian Zionists are in fact deeply devout Christians who are strongly committed to their faith and seek to convert everyone in the world, especially Jews, to Christianity. According to the narratives they reference, when Jews gain control over the land of Palestine and Jesus Christ returns, they will be given an ultimatum that they must convert to Christianity, and if they refuse, they will be massacred. This presents a contradiction. Jews say that while Christian Zionists support them, they do not actually accept Jewish beliefs and are ultimately aiming to eliminate Judaism. Therefore, it is said that the support of Christian Zionists for Israel is temporary and fragile, and in reality, it does not align with the true interests of the Jewish people. They view Israel as a tool to fulfill their own religious prophecy.
و واقعش اینه که ربطی به منافع واقعی ما نداره. به ما به چشم یک وسیله نگاه میکنن. واقعش اینه که تو داستان این مسیحیان انجیلی الان یک
The reality is that a major shift is taking place among evangelical Christians. Within the younger evangelical community, significant doubt and hesitation have emerged regarding support for Israel. Today, the younger generation, those under 30, for example, is rapidly withdrawing its support for Israel. Older generations have remained somewhat loyal, but after October 7th and Israel's attack on Gaza, along with the atrocities committed there, public opinion in Western countries, especially among the youth, has been deeply affected. Now we see that young people in Western countries, wherever gatherings take place, whether in stadiums, concerts, or universities, are chanting against Israel, expressing support for Palestinians, and voicing outrage over the crimes in Gaza. The truth is that young Christian Zionists and evangelicals have also been strongly influenced by this atmosphere, and signs are beginning to appear that the previous level of support no longer exists. It is predicted that if this trend continues, evangelical support for Israel will gradually weaken and may eventually collapse entirely.
انجیلی از اسرائیل در معرض خطر قرار میگیره و کمرنگ میشه و چه بسا ممکنه یک روزی کاملا این پدیده مثلا در فرو بپاشه.
I understand that they have this belief and they see all of this as the end of times and something they should move forward to. But how do they, on the other hand, how do evangelicals justify the humanitarian crises in Gaza and Lebanon?
It's part of God's plan. So it's, you know, when you give something a kind of a very otherworldly kind of an explanation or philosophy, and it's, you know, humans are sometimes selective in which part of a reality they want to focus on, which part they want to believe in. So it's always, you know, God gave this land to the Jewish people. So it's theirs. They have a very kind of a firm right. And anyone who's questioning this, whether in a kind of a political or military or whatever kind of a questioning of this Jewish right to the Holy Land, that person is in the wrong. So it was Hamas's fault. It's the Palestinians' fault. They're getting in the way of God's plan. But also I have to mention this, that when we talk about American Christian Zionists or evangelicals, it's not something that's, you know, it's not something that's engraved in stone. These people and their ideas have changed throughout time, and it will change as well. So we really don't know what the final impact of this 2-year war on Gaza would be on individual human beings who categorize themselves as Christian Zionists. For many of them, this might, you know, make them change how they view things, because even before the 7th of October attack, there were some polls indicating that among the younger generation of evangelical Christians, support for Israel was in decline. By in decline, I don't mean that they just put aside supporting Israel and, you know, they overwhelmingly, for example, support Palestine, but there was a gradual decline, meaning that younger people, younger generations were starting to think a bit differently, starting to think about justice as well as this issue of, you know, this theological kind of a framework to see what's happening in the Middle East. They were moving towards including justice in their ultimate judgment of what's happening. And I believe that, well, the 7th of October attack, the Al-Aqsa flood operation, the 2-year war on Gaza, will lead a lot of people into thinking more critically about this issue. I don't know if there is any poll yet on this or not, but, you know, this generational gap was forming before all of this happened. So we have to bear this in mind as well, that things are not fixed and they might change.
They're always changing. And of course, during these 2 years, the Israeli atrocities are bound to have an effect on this generation and their, you know, changing opinions and outlook towards Israel and what's happening with occupied Palestine. And, well, I want to turn to the role of Christian Zionists in U.S. politics. How did they manage to inject their worldview into U.S. foreign policy?
By organizing, by advocating, by coming together, as I said, having influential leaders that lead people into amassing their energy into making, having some effect on the country's actual policy. So it's important to note that some of these groups, like, if I'm not mistaken, Christians United for Israel, the total number of the members are larger than the whole number of Jews living inside America.
Oh, wow.
So that's how influential in terms of, for example, voting, and their because we often talk about the Jewish vote, for example, and how influential it is. But for years before all of these events in the Middle East happened, Netanyahu and many Israeli politicians have been gradually turning their attention from American Jews to Christian Zionists, because they believe that these people would be more beneficial for them. An interesting fact about American Jews is that a big part of them are they have left-wing liberal ideas which might be very different to the right-wing policies of Netanyahu. That doesn't mean that they are totally critical of Israel, but that they do allow for criticism towards Israel. But Christian Zionists, on the other hand, because they believe that everything is part of God's plan for this land, they usually do not criticize controversial Israeli policies, like, for example, expanding the settlements in the West Bank,
right.
yeah, or even annexing the West Bank. So that's why these people have become a more reliable ally for Israel within the United States. Yes. So, as I said, part of it is their organization, the way they vote. Many of the policies that Trump has chosen to move forward with, not just in this his most recent term, but also in the previous term, for example, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, were partially to satisfy his Christian Zionist voters.
On the anniversary of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, the Palestine Museum in Tehran opened Symphony of Crime, a powerful exhibition of resistance art. 15 artists presented more than 30 cartoons portraying the violence and suffering inflicted under Zionist occupation. Our team visited the gallery to witness how art becomes a voice of defiance and remembrance.
این نمایشگاه با محوریت بحث اون اتفاق 7 اکتبر.
This exhibition was organized around the events of October 7th, the Palestinian operation on that day. Our perspective was that from within this event, from within this unfolding movement, an awakening should emerge, and thankfully it has. We also want to be part of that path and contribute as artists and as caricature artists. The difference between a caricature artist and other types of artists is that the content is produced very quickly, and a message conveyed doesn't require subtitles or translation. It connects easily with all audiences. That means you could present this same exhibition in another country, in any language, without any changes, and people of all ages, backgrounds, and perspectives would still be able to engage with it and understand a message. Our aim has been to provoke thought, raise awareness, and awaken society, so that people realize a horrific event is happening in Gaza, a genocide, a massacre of children. People should not remain silent or indifferent. They must take action and make an impact. Our work may be a small step toward preventing this tragedy, and we hope can be meaningful.
The subjects I've worked on are not merely recounting events, they are analyses of those events. One of the key aspects of caricature is that we don't just inform the audience, we offer analysis. Sometimes we even present arguments to explain why what has happened should be considered a crime or an act of occupation. Why is this action fundamentally problematic? We clarify these points. 2 of my works currently on display in the exhibition reflect this approach. One features an image of an octopus with a cylindrical hat and smoking a cigar, symbolizing colonialism and oppressive power structures. The goal of this piece is to draw public attention to a broader issue and to say our concern isn't just here. At one time, South Africa was occupied, a revolution occurred, and that occupation ended. After that came the issue of Palestine. Before all of that, Native Americans in the Americas were subjected to genocide and their populations were wiped out. There are examples of struggles that succeeded and others that were defeated, like South Africa and Palestine, which is still in the middle of its path. We must understand that the issue should not be framed in terms of ethnicity or tied to a specific religion, nor should it be turned into a confrontation. We must focus on the root of colonialism, and that must be dismantled.
The 35 works presented here are all in the form of caricatures, theme-driven caricatures forming a symphony of crime. Our subject is the same, the killing of children and the crimes committed by Israel, particularly focusing on the figure of Netanyahu in the context of Gaza. That is the central theme. And the common thread among all the works is the spirit of the resistance front and the shared concern for such events. Some individuals, media outlets, or public figures may not feel a sense of urgency about this issue. But what unites all the artists in this exhibition is their concern for addressing this tragedy within society.
Art can undoubtedly carry the voice of the oppressed people of Palestine to the entire world, and not just convey it, but also solidify it. A powerful work of art can endure over time, remain in people's minds, become a symbol, turn into a cultural reference, and circulate widely, continuously reused and reinterpreted.
Even before Israel's bombing campaign against Iran began, Christian Zionist leaders were calling for escalation, framing war as prophecy in motion. When the strike started, they didn't mourn the devastation, they rejoiced in it. Mike Huckabee, longtime evangelical ally of Donald Trump and now U.S. ambassador to Israel, declared online that Trump had been spared from assassination to fulfill God's plan in West Asia. And now with Israel's assault on Iran, that theology finds its battlefield. For Christian Zionists, the bombing of Tehran or Isfahan isn't a geopolitical crisis. It's a signpost on the road to revelation. Civilian casualties, regional chaos, nuclear brinkmanship all become proof that the end is near and therefore divinely ordained. What the rest of the world sees as a humanitarian disaster, they see as destiny. The danger isn't just the war on Iran, it's the belief that such a war is holy.